I hope you can hear me well. We are going to get started so that we can finish in good time. I'd like to confirm that all our panelists are on board. Meanwhile, thank you for joining. You feel free to introduce yourself, your organization, and where you're joining us from on the chat. Yeah, so we look forward to having a fairly engaging discussion. That looks into local content creation for digital inclusion in Africa. Thank you for Tandanet, APC, and Rhizomatica for making this series possible. My name is Rispa Arose, and I'm here representing Tandanet, and I will be your moderator for the session today. A few housekeeping. The first is I'd welcome again everyone to introduce themselves on the chat. And also, I'm sure during the session, you will have comments, clarification that you may wish to make over the course of this session. I will encourage you to type out any question or clarification that you may have on the chat. Those will be picked up and addressed to the relevant panelists or speakers. And also if you can specify who the question is directed to. I'd like to remind everyone that we intend to create a caring space. And so we ask everyone to hold space for one another and to do our best to extend compassion and kindness to those who are in this space, acknowledge the differences and lived experiences of everyone in this room. We encourage a very collaborative and participatory discussions during the session. So again, welcome everyone. And then also to frame the overall goal of this webinar is that we will be talking, or the webinar will be about local content creation for digital inclusion. So looking at reclaiming ownership, amplifying our voices, and fostering a vibrant digital ecosystem where everyone has a place to amplify their voices. So we'll dive into the world of local content creation, understanding its critical role in bridging the gap and empowering communities to tell their own stories, share their knowledges, and participate meaningfully in the online world. I welcome you to dive in. Today, we have a great lineup of speakers from the continent, and they are going to talk about the challenges, enablers, and opportunities that allows for local content creation for digital inclusion. We are going to have two parts of the panel discussion, looking into number one, local content creation for digital inclusion. And the second part will look into the trends and innovation in local content creation and digital inclusion. And then after that, we'll in between, we'll have breaks for question and answers. So to start off, I welcome Judith Ogutu from Paradigm Initiative. So just a bit, apologies. Yeah, to start off, we can start with Rebecca Riakitimbo from Common Voice Mozilla, who is currently a community engagement fellow at Mozilla, and she's working on establishing and supporting diverse Kiswahili language and tech communities along axes of gender, age, religion, origin, accent, and vernacular usage towards building an open voice data set in Kiswahili. As a fellow at Mozilla, she has led efforts toward common voice, gender action plans, and grantees gender in artificial intelligence assessment mechanism to help address algorithm biases in artificial intelligence. So Rebecca, I welcome you to start off this conversation. So please give us a brief background of the organization, the community you serve, your involvement in local content creation for digital inclusion, as well as how you define it in your context and for your organization, how you carry out local content creation for digital inclusion, your journey, as well as any success story that you've had. Over to you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Rispa. Hi, everyone. Thank you for participating in this webinar. Local content is very key to the development, especially for the Global South, and pushing for that inclusivity within the digital space. So I am a Common Voice Fellow who works mostly on gender and diversity for the Kiswahili language. What we're doing is we're building a data set for Kiswahili speakers that are spread across Kenya, Tanzania, some parts of DRC as well. So we have been curating the data set that is open source to foster innovation across the continent for different languages. So the co-work within African languages began with Kinyarwanda that's spoken in Rwanda. And after building the data set for Kinyarwanda, we moved to Kiswahili, and we've also had work in Luganda that is still in progress. Now we also have work in Swana, and we're adding more African languages, but those are languages that I've mentioned because there is specific emphasis and more funding support. However, because the Common Voice platform is an open platform, we have other communities of African languages that have gathered and built together data set for their languages that are not necessarily receiving extra funding support from Mozilla. So we have a lot of, we have Hausa, we have Yoruba, we have communities that are now adding other mother tongue languages. For example, we have people from Kenya who are trying to add Kikuyu on the platform. We have a lot more communities that are coming together and are wanting to build data sets for their languages. So I don't know if I'm allowed to share. I would like to share. Let me just share a presentation. I think you can see my screen. So Common Voice is basically a project that its aim is to make voice recognition open and accessible. Technology ecosystem, a lot of the data sets that are used to train models are not exactly diverse enough. The data sets are not easily found, they're not open, people have to pay for them, and also that is not really fostering the development of the voice ecosystem. So what Common Voice is trying to do is sort of decentralize voice technology data sets locally from the communities and make it available for them to actually build tools, because curating data sets is not cheap. It comes with a cost, and this kind of helps to make that process easier and foster innovation within the continent. So just a brief history of how Common Voice began. So Common Voice was officially launched in 2017. And at that time, it was more of an effort within the Mozilla Corporation, or the company side of Mozilla, to create a deep speech model that will be able to serve certain communities of people within the voice space. But after realizing that there's a lot of gaps within that space, and also the need of Mozilla Foundation, which mostly work around trustworthy AI and internet health, to make sure that we're able to kind of diversify the pool within AI, looking at voice technology. That's when Common Voice was transitioned into the foundation, so that the work can mostly foster trustworthy AI. And in that process, in 2018, it became multilingual. So more languages came on the platform: German, Irish, Kinyarwanda, others. And in 2018, more languages kept coming up: indigenous languages, languages that were very underrepresented within the space, more features were added, and then the component of making it more of crowdsourcing became more of the flag line or what was being used at that point. So, but when the pandemic hit, of course, I saw that transitioning happening towards more of trustworthy AI and data governance. So in 2021 is where the Kiswahili project itself started. And so far, this is data sets that were there by the first quarter of 2023. There were about 27,000 plus voice data sets in over 108 languages that have been added on the platform. Over 200 developers that have helped to create the software. We have about 450,000 unique contributors who have contributed, and some have validated the content that is available on the Common Voice platform. So the unique thing about the Common Voice platform is that it allows you not only to contribute to voice, but allows you as well to validate and to be part of that process from the very beginning. What I mean by from the very beginning is that people have the chance to, one, go on the platform and say that I want to donate my voice. Two, go on the platform and say that I want to validate the data sets that's available, because for you to create models that have no biases, models that have been checked, you need to have at least different training data sets, including a data set that has been validated. That's why there's a component of validating the voices that have been recorded in the platform. Then there's also people who come on board and say, I want to contribute to the text corpus, because these voice data sets, they run on the text corpus. And then, so people contribute in that manner, some sentences, some voices, some validating, and then others make use of the data set. But since it's crowdsourced, anyone can come at any time and add new languages. This is just to give you a brief idea of what happens for a new language to come on the Common Voice platform. First of all, you make a language request. If you've realized that your language is not on the platform, you go on the Common Voice platform and you actually request for it. Then it will allow you to move to the next phase, which is a website localization. So you have to localize that site into your local language. Why? Because it's your users or the people who will be contributing in your local language. So they need to have that platform already in that language. Then you work behind the scenes with support from other language coordinators through Pontoon to localize the site. Then you collect the sentences. So these are usually CC0, just because they will be used and it's open source. So we want to make sure that people are aware of what they're contributing into. That's why that's the kind of licensing that's required for the sentences. After you've collected enough sentences, then you can launch the language on the platform and start doing voice contribution, voice validation. And after every 3 months, a data set is released of every language that is on the platform. So the different communities within the Common Voice, and they're self-organized, most of them, and all the data that is generated by the communities is published under open license. So you can engage with Common Voice in different ways. Community chats, the platform. There's something that I want to touch on briefly before I just round up my presentation, is that there are challenges when it comes to gender and voice technology. And when we talk of local content, most of it is also geared toward making sure we're including those communities that are marginalized or left out. And that includes women as well, and men and other genders. So the challenges that come within, hello?
Go ahead.
So these challenges within the gender challenges in voice technology is one of them is, I know for most of the time people tend to say voice technology is very inclusive. You know, most of the voice technology, voice assistants you use, they depict a woman. Alexa, Siri, they have female names, they speak like women, so they must be inclusive. But that is not the actual case in itself for men than it is for women. And it is much more accurate for white male than it is for black males. Why? Because most of the data set that is used to train this voice technology or speech recognition systems has more male data sets than female data sets. And that is one challenge that usually leads to the biases when it comes to the outputs that they give. There's also global minority do not look at things like access and affordability. These technologies require a lot of connectivity. They require people to be connected. For example, our platform itself requires you to have internet for you to be able to contribute. That is already a barrier in itself, especially for women who might not have access. If you're talking about women in rural areas who might benefit very heavily from voice technology, and then you bring them a technology where they need internet or they need a smartphone to access it, that is already a hindrance for them. So we have challenges to get more women engaged in the voice space, not only as contributors to the dataset, but also as users of the products that are built out of those datasets. Then there's also a lack of open data relating to the metrics of what is used to train those models that are currently existing. For example, we do not know the gender and the diversity in first the teams that are building those speech recognition models, the data set that they're using. So that's one of the things that Common Voice is trying to counter. And there's also an aspect of digital literacy. These technologies already require people to have certain skills, and not everyone has. And this further widens the gender gap. Then there's also a trust issue. And this is something that we face a lot when we're going out to collect voice data sets, for example. You meet communities that already have perceived thoughts, maybe from cultural context, about collecting their voices. Some will shy off and don't feel comfortable contributing. So that already brings a blockage. So we've had people say, what are you going to do with my voice? You going to use it for witchcraft? It's associated with such stuff. So there's all that hindrances and stuff, especially if you reach out to rural areas because you want to include them. So those things kind of hinder more women to participate. So how are we trying to counter that? One way is to make sure we have a gender plan. If you want to have that inclusivity, you need to have a plan which identifies what are the challenges and how can you counter them, and have measures and indicators that sort of guide. So that's what the gender action plan was. Another thing is purposely curating gender balance or when you're curating or building your community. And you have to look at it from cross-secting factors like the locations, rural versus urban, the accents that are spoken. For example, Kiswahili is spoken in different countries. What's spoken in Kenya might differ from Tanzania, might differ from DRC. Even within those countries, there's also variances in how people speak Swahili. I've had a chance to also live in Congo, and you'll find that people in Katanga and people in Bukavu and Goma might have a different in how they speak. People in the coastal areas and people in the mainland areas might speak different Swahili. So how do you ensure that you cover all those accents? You have a speech recognition model that can actually respond to someone with an accent that has a mother tongue influence or with a specific dialect, because there are about 15 dialects of Kiswahili. And what we're commonly using is standardized Swahili, but what about all these people that speak these variants of Kiswahili? Then there's also just making sure you have guidelines that make people feel inclusive and they can participate in the process. And most importantly, aggregating and enabling the data by gender to ensure that that data you're collecting can be disaggregated by gender. So even someone who is building a model out of that data set can know that my data set is 50% male and maybe 50% female or 60% and vice versa. So also that participatory approach, how do you include different communities of gender? But there's also a lot of consideration, and this apply when it comes to building itself. Who has the power to decide in these communities? Is it men? Is it women? Is it local leaders? Is it traditional leaders? Who has the power and how do you engage them? How do you even out things? And then the fundamental rights, privacy, of course, consent for people who are contributing. What are the values? How can you control data? Do you use user-centered design? Does it benefit the community? How do you look at access issues? How will people be able to reach that? And then most recently, not recent, but something that is very critical that is creeping up, especially with development of more technology, is of course technology-related violence towards specific genders. How do you address that? Those are some of the things. Of course, things like the data training sets, to make sure you have sets that can be able to test gender responsiveness of your models, the diversity in the teams that build, the skills of the communities, auditing for gender imbalances. These are all things that contribute. Just to tie it back to the topic of the session, language was one of the key barriers of why people do not access certain digital tools, because they're mostly available in foreign languages. There's a lot of content on the internet on different digital platforms that is actually in English and other Western languages. So the lack of these other languages plays a critical role in why certain using technologies, take up of AI, take up of things like voice technology. If we have more diversity in language, then that's how we're decentralizing technology to reach people from across the margins, from beyond the areas that we're not able to reach at the moment. And it's also very critical to people who might have barriers that are limiting them to access. This can be things like normal literacy levels, arithmetics, reading. If they have that challenge, but you're able to reach them in their language and in technology that comes in a form that is easy for them to interact with, such as voice, it makes it easy for more people to participate. Back to you, Rispa. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rebecca. That was an excellent presentation and a great way to kick off this conversation on local content. Thank you for really highlighting the essence of including diversity of language when talking about localized content, and also mentioning critical infrastructure or fundamental things to have in place that will support local content creation, such as it cannot work without access. It cannot work without literacy. It cannot work without including voices of the underrepresented, such as women's voices, in creating or in the discussion of local content for digital inclusion. Thank you so much for that, Rebecca. I'd remind the participants that we have the chat section. If you have any question, please just use the chat to ask your question. After we've heard from two more speakers, we will get into a Q&A before we get into the next panel discussion. So thank you, Rebecca, and I will now welcome our second speaker, Engineer Thomas Wanzala, who is Engineer Thomas Wanzala, who is an ICT expert with vast experiences in supporting ICT for development, with over 10 years experience in the UN, supporting refugees and government. Currently, he heads a countrywide digital accessibility project sponsored by the UK government digital access program that seek to enhance safe and secure access to digital government services for persons with disabilities and senior citizens. He's also the founder of a newly registered community network in Kenya known as Chikweyo, Gifted Community Network, that stands for children, women, elderly, and youth. Thank you so much, Thomas, for joining and just building onto the conversation of digital inclusion in terms of local content, especially giving perspective of the underrepresented, such as persons with disability. Over to you, Thomas.
Thank you very much, Rispa. Hello, colleagues and members. As Rispa has rightfully introduced, basically building on this conversation about digital inclusivity and local content. As she has mentioned, we are currently engaged under a project funded by the UK government that seeks to empower disadvantaged communities, especially persons with disabilities and senior citizens, in terms of accessing digital services. So the objective is to ensure that the content and the services that are digitally available are able to be accessed by all citizens, communities, persons with disabilities, the elderly, and in two ways, from the point of where they are being provided by, for example, the government itself, and also by the consumers who are the ones providing the demand for those services. So, RISPA, if you could kindly, just for the benefit of our participants, share my presentation so that as they go along with me. Yeah, so we basically going to give a very brief overview of the journey towards this and the key elements that constitute this content to ensure that the citizens and the communities are able to be fully included in this particular space. So this journey, yeah. So this journey is about if content is being produced, then what do you have to look at for us to consider the digital content fully inclusive? Because there is a risk that there is so much, just echoing what my other panelist has mentioned, that so much is available, for example, on the internet, but without adhering to a few factors that I'm going to highlight, then you're running the risk of having excluded so many people. So what is this digital local content that you're talking about? There are many ways to look at it. The idea here is that what fully qualified to be local content is content that resonates well with the community and the intended audience, both from the level of production of that particular content, the attributes of the content itself, and also the aim of that particular content, the objectives. So, for instance, if you are in Kenya and you're producing content that is for the consumption of the majority of the citizens, then if you use a language that is not used by, for example, Kenyans generally, then you definitely excluding them. If you're producing content, for example, for people that let's consider maybe illiterate, and then your content is only available in a language they don't understand, then in that aspect already you are excluding them. But for this purpose of this discussion, so I'm just trying to confirm that there are very many facets in terms of ensuring that this content is fully inclusive, by even looking at the fact that if the content is even in the language that the intended audience speaks and understands, you have used technology that's readily available, but it's not addressing the issues that they like, or it's not respectful, for instance, to the culture. Maybe you are using, or maybe examples that are being used in the content are not respectful of maybe the culture, then there is a possibility of that community repelling or not being receptive to that particular content. And therefore, however good that content is, it will not have reached those people. And in that case, it will automatically have excluded them. And let's take, for instance, content wants to spread awareness on things like health measures, maybe after in the wake of a pandemic. But the examples that are being used, maybe it's video, are not friendly to a certain group, even just to watch, maybe when they're together, parents and their children and such. So the moment that content almost shows up maybe on TV, then this particular community, first thing is to switch off that. So you are excluding that community, not because the language is bad or such, but just by use of the example and such, and not being respectful to, for example, that culture. So the conversation here is that as we produce content, we consider very many factors in order to make it consumable by very many people, and that means now we are being inclusive. Nevertheless, there are also other areas in technology, and that is really what we are focused on in the project that we are carrying out currently. And this is about the principles of accessibility in the digital space. These have been defined by organizations. For example, guidelines provided by what we call the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines it's an organization under the World Wide Web Consortium. These are really international organizations that are respected in that space of digital accessibility. So they give guidelines broadly, and Kenya, luckily, last year became the first country in Africa to adopt those standards and also come up with what we call the digital accessibility standards. In Kenya, it's referred to as KS2952. So these standards really define all the possible facets that are important when providing digital services, both the hardware and software. So therefore, when you come to the WCAG aspect that generally is specific and addresses areas of software, that is content and maybe online, the websites, and even just content, even for example, a report, a Word document, a text document, and such. So there are four areas that are defined. These guidelines they called perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. So the idea here is that as anyone worldwide, and we're talking about local content, this is applicable even to it eventually forms what is in the global sphere. It has to adhere to, if it adheres to those four principles, and then it will be able to properly achieve inclusivity. So we're talking about if our content needs to be, it has to be perceivable. That means every user using any of the senses is able to get to that content. So for example, the examples are given there. So if there is content that cannot be, if content, for example, is only in a picture, or and without any explanation, then you could be excluding people. If the contrast is not good enough, you could be excluding people. When you look at content that is not operable, then you are excluding, for example, persons with disabilities. For instance, if someone cannot operate a mouse, but there is a possibility of using the keyboard, then that content should be able to be utilized in that sense. So then we're talking about, we have understandable. So here we have content that if you use assistive technology or not, let me give an example of a document, even online, the way the layout is provided. So for people who are able in terms of visual, you can clearly maybe able to decipher maybe the major title, the headline, the subheadline, and such. Under normal circumstances, there are people who don't have that ability, and they could be relying on other things to get that content. So these assistive technologies should be in a position to know that now they are moved from the major chapter, maybe they're going to in that cascading area. And then when they get back, for example, to another major topic, that one happens. So if a very good, for example, research with the findings is being presented and it has not considered those factors, and it's maybe discussing a serious issue at the local level, but it is not being even, it's excluding people just by the way it is formatted. So we come into this space to observe and check, and for a start, government services, government digital content. As some of you will be aware, the government of Kenya is now onboarding all its services online. And that means if these services do not meet these basic requirements, then they're excluding a very big section of the population. And lastly, of the four guidelines, the robust. So this is also for the content to be able to be used by various media. Let me give an example. You have content maybe on the laptop, it's quite okay. You try to access it on a smartphone, then it's jumbled up altogether. Or you have content maybe using a browser like Mozilla, it's quite okay. You try to use Chrome, you can't access, you can't even understand. So those are the small things that matter, that appear small, but when not put into consideration, then the content doesn't make sense, doesn't become useful. And for that reason, many people become excluded from the use of that. So we go into this space trying to provide the capacity to the people involved, like in government and outside government, by creating awareness and even addressing specific platforms by use of examples. Currently, we have engaged with the government of Kenya, and I'm glad to confirm to the participants that with our support, we have been able to fully enhance the eCitizen. eCitizen is the main Kenya government platform through which almost all services will eventually be. So the main domain has now been enhanced. A few areas remaining that are not very powerful, but this is to ensure that a large percentage of all the citizens are able to access this content. This also applies to judiciary we're working with. The treasury, we already did that. The National Council for Persons with Disabilities are really making sure that persons with disabilities, through even registration and such. So these services we look at, and the ICT authority. We have also participated in a provision of, for example, the assistive software that I've just mentioned to all the libraries of the KNLS, National Library Services, countrywide. So that, for example, people with visual impairment, when they're able to access these libraries, then they are able to access all the content using the assistive software without any problem. We've trained the government developers, for instance, the developers in charge of the eCitizen platform, the Treasury, the ICTA, and ICTA, ICT Authority, is the government arm of Kenya that is responsible for all government content in Kenya. So by empowering them and all ICT officers in the ministries, departments, and agencies, then we aspire to reach a level whereby before the content is placed, any content is placed, for example, on a government platform, this content has been checked for accessibility using the principle that we have provided, using the tools that we assist to support, and using and also assisting them to be able to detect, for example, if content is not accessible. So by that, then we are able to have content that is locally created, produced, but fully inclusive by considering all aspects. And where maybe technology or those factors have not been easily embedded, maybe due to some other challenges, then we encourage them and we create this awareness among both the public and private sector, for example, to use alternative methods. Like we can have an accessibility widget whereby a person can click on it. If the contrast is not okay, then they're able to change the contrast. If maybe the size of the font is not okay, then they're able to change without affecting the back end of the design of the particular platform. And even encouraging instances like the use of maybe sign language interpreters whenever you have your content. So I would like to and thank everyone for being attentive for this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Very, very great presentation, and thank you for giving us POA that we can use when thinking about local content creation. Perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Thank you, and great discussion in the chat. Keep writing your question. We will get back onto them once we have heard from our panelists. Also, a reminder to the panelists, just share links to some of the resources you've mentioned on the chat so that the participants can be able to look and find more about your work there. And next on, I will now welcome Barak Otieno. Barak, are you on the call? So Barak is
Yes, I'm here.
Today we'll be representing Kictanet amongst the multitude of hats that he wears within the digital ecosystem in Kenya. So over to you, Barak.
Thank you very much, Rispa. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Good to be among friends. Hi, Emmanuel. Good to see many familiar faces here. So yes, as Rispa has indicated, my name is Barak Otieno. Today, I'm wearing my hat as a trustee of the Kenya ICT Action Network. I was given this opportunity and privilege by my colleagues to represent the organization. There are many activities that are going on at Kictanet, and due to the fact that we appreciate the developments that are taking place in this space, its contribution again was necessary. I'm also very active in the community networks movement. I'm passionate about connectivity and society. Let me put it that way. So together with RISPA and other colleagues, we are the Association of Community Networks in Kenya, where I am associated with AHERI and the AHERINet Community Network. So today I'll not be talking about AHERI and AHERINet because we have other people to talk about that, but I'll focus on Kictanet. Because of what has been presented by Rebecca and Engineer Wanzala, I'll not repeat a lot of what has been done, but I'm going to straight away delve into what Kictanet has actually been able to do with respect to strengthening or ensuring that there's a suitable environment for content creators and for content development in Kenya. So Kictanet started as a project in around 2004, 2005. It was an initiative under the Association of Progressive Communications known as Catalyzing Access to ICTs. So for many years, Kictanet has existed to catalyze how communities are able to take advantage of information and communication technologies. It is best remembered for midwifing the process that led to creation of the ICT policy in 2006, and which actually brought to the fore appreciation and realization of information and communication technologies within the public and private domain in Kenya. It is worth saying that previously, actually around 1998, 1997, internet was illegal in government corridors. And so stakeholders came together and tried to make what was illegal to be legal. Why was internet illegal? Simply because the government could not control it or did not have control over it. Let me speak in low tones because the government is everywhere. But we have come really far. And I believe the same is the case with other African countries. If I may start with the historical background, and I promise to be very brief, and I'll not say like a preacher man. In the initial years, the focus was actually on infrastructure. But the moment infrastructure was created, then currently the focus has been on content. And so I'm going to quickly illustrate some of the initiatives or activities that Kictanet has done on the content side. Of course, I must point out the fact that It is a network, a multi-stakeholder network that is made up of many actors and stakeholders, and many times it just creates a platform or an opportunity for other stakeholders to thrive. Among the partners that KICTANET works with is the Bloggers Association of Kenya. We also have Association of Media Women in Kenya. Just to name but a few, which are the institutions that are active on the content space, but which KICTANET collaborates with. KICTANET, as I mentioned earlier, the focus has been on policy. Policy is key because it is systemic in nature. It aims to create a fertile environment in which bloggers can be able to thrive. So it has measured on policy, but also it has measured on ensuring that there is a legal and regulatory regime that facilitates um, uh, content creators, be they bloggers or be they infrastructure organizations or companies, to be able to operate under a policy framework that takes care of their interest. But I just looking at the call, I'm sure not many of us are interested in the policy jargon or policy conversation. I want to just take us to a number of resources or a compendium of resources that have been developed, which I believe are going to be useful to participants on this call. Let me just share my screen, if you allow me, Rispa. Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so in front of you is the KICTANET website, basically kictanet.or.ke, and I've gone to the link with the reports. So of course, as I have mentioned, there are many programs that do run at KICTANET, but I want to focus specifically on publications or content that has been developed to facilitate those who are in the content development space. The first and the most recent project that I want to point to is an initiative that took place in the year 2023, and it culminated in the development of a report that showed accessibility of government websites for persons with disabilities. It was actually a scorecard. So this initiative basically scored through or went through various government websites, trying to identify which ones are suitable for persons with disabilities. And I mention this because Engineer Wanzala has spoken at length about ensuring that the differently abled our differently abled brothers and sisters are also not left behind. So this would be an interesting resource that we can all check. And it really highlights some of the particular, for lack of a better word, steps that we can take to ensure that our differently abled brothers are able to access government services and, of course, by extension, other websites. Let me point out that this project actually resulted in a number of government and private institutions actually requesting for their websites to be assessed on whether they complied with being able to address the needs or concerns of our brothers with disability. The objective or the whole objective of this initiative was to create more awareness on the need for inclusivity when developing some of these platforms that host content. The other important report that I want to point out, in the interest of time, please go to the KICTANET website. You can download the report and read it for yourself. I also want to look at a specific report that I had picked, which I believe is going to be of benefit. Just a moment. I think I had actually opened it up. Just a moment, I pull it up because I had opened it separately. Mm-hmm. Yes. Apologies for that mix-up, but we are up. We do have another resource, basically the Women at Web Content Creation Guidebook. Again, as through its work with different stakeholders, and I think this is also what this initiative has been trying to address. Beyond catalyzing access to ICTs, Kictanet also came to the realization on the kind of power that ICTs do give to community members and the different groups in the communities. And beyond just doing the policy work, there's also a realization that capacity building and capacity development is key. When we look at our communities, we realize that in as much as we are talking about content, technology has given us the power to be content creators, but many of us or many of our community members do not understand how to utilize this power. So this is a guidebook or a guideline that was done in partnership with DW, again, which is available on the website. Through this, you can basically find detailed steps on not only finding content, but also creating content and the various platforms that you can use to be able to create content. So this is a simple guide that is aimed at enhancing and increasing the number of content creators. Just to take us back to reality, in Africa, we are net consumers of ICT goods and services. If you go online, say Netflix, let me use that as an example, or even Facebook, for lack of a better word, you'll find that the content that comes from most of our countries, whether Kenya or many other countries that are represented in this particular call, 98% is probably foreign content. Does this mean that we don't have our own content that we can be able to bring online? Of course, the answer is no. Most of us have grown up in the village, and there is all this folklore. Growing up in the village, I used to sit around the fire with my grandmother. The first time I heard about a hyena or a leopard was through a story. And for me, it was all imagery because I only came to see these animals when I was a teenager or an adult, and I managed to visit the park. But the initial picture was actually painted through a story. But most of these stories cannot be found online. Why can't they be found online? Because we don't know the process and the procedure for creating these stories and bringing them online. So this guide exists to create or to enable community members to be able to create such content. So with those very many words, Rispa, I beg to stop my presentation at that point. I have provided the link. There are so many resources on the Kictanet portal that are for public consumption or use with respect to content development and content creation. Some touch on policy frameworks, and I welcome all our participants to have a look at it and take advantage of the resources. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barak. It's very interesting to hear the history that you've brought in of the internet, and even sharing some of the guidance resources that you have produced at Kictanet in terms of local content creation. I hope that after this meeting, participants will indulge in those resources. Now, because of time, we won't go into question and answer directly. We will go into the next panel that will talk about trends and innovations that exist in terms of local content creation for digital inclusion. And without wasting much time, I want to welcome Judith Ogutu. Judith Ogutu is from Paradigm Initiative. She is the strategic communication professional with extensive experience in corporate, public, development, and nonprofit sectors. She has also demonstrated expertise in leveraging strategic communication to share opinions, manage reputation, influence narrative, and build brands. She currently serves as the communication manager at Paradigm Initiative, and has also worked as a journalist. So I'm really glad to welcome Judith, who will talk more about the work that Paradigm is doing in producing local content for digital inclusion. Over to you, Judith.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Respa, and thank you all the panelists who've spoken so far. Really insightful presentations, quite enlightening and, you know, eye-opening as well. So just to introduce ourselves briefly, I don't know whether I can share my presentation, or you can let me share. Okay, cool. Let me just share. Just a minute. So, as mentioned, Paradigm Initiative is a non-profit organization that has been in operation for 16 years now. So we have presence across Africa. I am not able to share for some. Oh yeah, cool. I've seen. So we have, no, it's fine. I've seen. It was, I don't know why it's hanging. It's a bit slow. Anyway, so we have presence across 6 African countries, and we work with partners across 27 African countries. So what we are currently doing is that we connect the youth with digital opportunities and also advocate for protection of their rights online. So far we've been able to impact about 150,000 youth with digital opportunity, 150,000 youth with digital opportunities. We also produce short films, like Respa mentioned. So we've produced, we're going to be producing our 4th film so far. And these films are produced from our Londa report. The report actually looks at the state of digital rights and inclusion across the continent. So we look at different number of countries. So the latest report that we have is looking at 24 African countries. So what we do is that we monitor and see what's happening in the continent, and then just highlight those findings. So what we realized was that the report, not everybody likes to report. As you all know, Africa is a storytelling continent. We love stories, we love to listen to stories, we love to tell stories as well. So we thought to ourselves, how can we present this report in a way that reaches more people, in a way that is easily understood? So that's how we started to develop short films. So the short films that we've produced so far are a reflection of the reports that we produced that cast and spotlight situation around the continent as far as digital rights and inclusion is concerned. So the first film we produced was based on our 2019 report, and it touches on ethical dilemma of a young man. So he's called Jude, he looks for work, and so we present it that way. So I think we can play the reel now, just to highlight our short forms, if it's fine. It's a very short reel, maybe 2 minutes, just to give the audience a sense of what we do. Okay, since it's not able, you're not able to play it. Yeah, just click onto it, it'll play. Okay, yeah. If you clicked onto it, it'll play. Just click on the screen. Okay, not a problem. Fine, no worries. So the films are award-winning. So we've produced Training Day. We were able to produce another one called Focus, and we've been able to produce another one called Finding Diana. So our latest film called Undersight is actually just about to be released. We released our trailer last year, December. So the thematic areas these films cover are diverse, and they're a reflection of findings of this report. So they cut across surveillance, data privacy, internet access, internet shutdown, and all these things cut across inclusion, digital inclusion in a way, because you find that if internet is shut down, then people cannot access the internet. If the surveillance, then that means people cannot freely access information that they'd like to. If there is no infrastructure for internet access, then that means a lot more people are not able to access that internet. So that is what we've been doing. So looking at just the questions that we are looking at, the 3 questions, and we are looking at the challenges, the opportunities that are there, and what we've been able to do with that. So you find that the way in which we encourage local content development is we go and announce a call for production. So we spread it across Africa. In our context, Africa is our context, because we look at the African situation and then we reach out to film producers across the region. So we send out our call and invite individuals to give us their synopses, ideas. Then based on what they share with us, we look at what resonates more or resonates best with what we are trying to put across, and whether whatever synopsis that has been shared also touches on the findings of the report and is a reflection of those findings. So what we do normally is we look at also the countries that are represented. We look at the accents. We look at the the type of violations or challenges of inclusion that are going on in those various countries. Then we pick out and say, okay, can we have a representation from perhaps Senegal? Can we have a representation from perhaps Nigeria? Can we have a representation from Kenya? So you find that the films that we've been producing try as much as possible to take into consideration the local people, the languages. Also, we try to ensure that our films are produced in different languages. So we have them in Swahili, we have them in English, we have them in French. And the initial ones, we also have them in Hausa. So you find that the aim of this is just to see how much people can we get with the information that we have packaged and put across. Because you realize that across the continent, such things like digital inclusion, there's not, the awareness is not to that optimum level. Yes, the journey has been going on. We've been able to raise awareness about what inclusion is, what it is not, the digital divide that we currently are facing right now, the challenges that are there. So you find that the opportunities we've been able to get is that we are able at least to provide a platform where individuals that are talented can come up, because we focus on local organizations within the region. So the people who've been producing the films, we've been working together to produce the films with us, are from Africa, actually. So that means the opportunity that we provide for them is economic empowerment. So you find that we're able to have a blend of cultures, and like that amplifies the cultural aspect of things. So then, of course, touches on the thinking of the different cultures that we have, and everyone and everything around that space. Another thing that is usually handy is the diverse perspectives that these films provide. You find that the perspective around Rwanda, for instance, like the training day has perspectives around Rwanda. It has perspectives around Togo, and the different challenges that each particular country is facing. So we try to project that, showcase that, so that then at least people are much more aware and they are much more informed that in this particular country, these are the major issues. So we look at sometimes it's just a challenge that cuts across Africa, like internet shutdown during elections. So that is a common theme that we see. So then how do we present it in such a way that we present the diverse perspective as far as the region and the continent is concerned? Another thing that we see as an opportunity normally is the knowledge sharing. You find that when the different cast and crew and actors come together, then knowledge is shared. Thoughts are shared, perspectives are put together. Yeah, so cool. Oh, thank you. So yeah, so that's what I would say. Of course, challenges we face are like the digital divide. We have lack of necessary infrastructure. We have language barriers. So those are some of the challenges we have. But of course, it's usually work in progress. So with that summary, I let me close my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Judith. And definitely share the links so that we can see some of the films that Paradigm has made. I've had an opportunity to watch one, and it was very educative and of quality. So it's always interesting to hear some of the journey that organizations go through to include or engage communities in creating this narrative in terms of storytelling and showcasing. Time is really not on our side. We have 2 more speakers and then we get into question and answers. So I'd request this remaining speakers to use 5 minutes to make their presentation, and then we can have question and answer. Again, I encourage you to use the chats if you have any questions so that we can have all of them at the tail end of the session. And next on, I will welcome or invite Okoro Onyekachi from Maji. He's a documentary filmmaker, network professional, participatory project developer, and environmental campaigner who have been working with local communities in rural and urban communities of Nigeria. Through his work, he has developed and worked in projects that promote human rights, campaign for just environmental rights, and support digital inclusion. So over to you, Okoro.
So good afternoon, Rispa. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
I would say Happy New Year. I'm just coming from the communities now, so I don't have any presentation. However, my presentation will come from my mind. So please, if there are any questions, please let me know. My name is Okoro Onyekachi Emmanuel. I'm the executive coordinator of the Media Awareness and Justice Initiative. The Media Awareness and Justice Initiative, short form, is called Maji, and Maji in Swahili means water. We work with rural communities in the Niger Delta. We work with marginalized groups, and we also engage with key stakeholders across the different levels of governance. Our work tries to ensure that we create the needed content to build awareness of these local communities, to speak for themselves, to engage with their leaders, and develop the right narratives that they can use to have their stories told and their selves being represented more properly. I will go to, and Rispa said 5 minutes, so I won't be taking too much time. The communities that we serve are local and rural communities. Some of them are also indigenous groups who have been suffering from environmental pollution. The Niger Delta is Nigeria's oil exploration hub. That's where all the oil drilling occurs. That's where all the oil transportation occurs. And that's where all the pollution occurs. This affects community lives. It affects community livelihoods, and it affects the ways communities carry out their traditional lives and engagements. As an organization, we have developed certain interventions that have tried to ensure that these communities have their voices heard. One of such interventions is Maji's community network. We currently have 3 community networks in 3 different communities. However, we have 2 that serve 5 to 7 resident communities, and it provides digital access, low-cost digital access to these communities. However, for us, what is much, much important is content development, because it's one thing for you to develop the platform that they can use. However, it's important that they have the content needed for them to be able to engage. And this content should not be imported. It should be generated and developed by themselves so that they can own the actual process. So we have taught them how to manage the community network. However, what we did to create content was we deployed air quality sensors. Now, these sensors collect air quality data. Now, this data is hosted on the community server, and they can access this information in their own way. Now, we have people which we have trained at the community level to interpret this data while also engaging with the communities to tell them these stories in their own language. So they understand the data, and then they can use the data to also tell their stories to their own leaders. Now, we have also developed a data app, which is currently being developed now. It should be released in this January. The app brings together all data information from the different portals of government, from the Oil Response Agency, and from also the air quality monitors themselves. So we can put information in the front and center of communities, of CSOs, and of importantly, journalists, so that there's a collaboration among these key stakeholders. It's important to note, and it's important, I want to put this out, that information that is not shared uniformly becomes distorted. If I'm a community person and I cannot work closely with a journalist so that he can tell the story the way I feel that story might be told, the journalist who goes back to his office will be also indebted to write the story in a way he feels he understands it, and by so doing misrepresent the actual content I'm trying to portray. So we try to bring these three people together, we train them, and we try for them to use the real-time data that is being collected by the community networks to tell their own story. I will go to the next point, which is challenges. Our major challenge in most cases has been the sustainability of the community network. The cost of sustaining community networks are constantly rising, no thanks to inflation. And in most cases, you have these costs affecting the subscription costs of these community networks, and by extension, the little tokens that communities pay to access 24 hours broadband internet. So for us, this is the only challenge we have. I just said I'm coming from the communities. MAGI I've currently used the data to institute a legal case against SPDC, that's Shell Petroleum Developed Country, in the UK. And the total number of claimants, or total number of community people who put forward that claim is 13,600. I would share a link to Lide. I'll share that link in the chat box soon. And that link will take you to where that report is. We are currently representing 13,600 persons. And for us, we think that is important. It's a very strong, it's because you can see that we have to go to the communities, listen to them, go back to the lawyers, explain using the data that we've collected, and vice versa like that, so that people are able to become part and parcel of the process, and in most especially own the process. Because we are CSOs, we don't live in these communities. But once the communities own the process and use the content that is developed via these networks, they can now develop their own content in their own way. They can tell their stories their own way, and they can use the stories how they feel. My last point will be, what are some of the innovative approaches? The approaches I've mentioned, but like I said, the one that is really recent is the DataCab website, the DataCab mobile app. It will be on App Store, on Google App Store, and on iOS very soon. And this can be used by partners, whether in Nigeria or outside Nigeria, for their own work. They can modify it, they can use it, they can assess it, and they can use that information or develop something around that kind of data tool, so that they can use to collect information and collect content that is relevant to the people that they serve. I'll stop here, Rispa, and I'll be very open to questions and answers when they do come. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Okoro, and thank you for bringing up the role of local platforms in pushing local content for development for the communities. It's very interesting to see and to hear community networks are engaging communities to produce platforms that will now pick their content to ensure that they are creating solutions for their problems. And thank you for sharing the links. It's on the chat. I don't know if we have Mike Kaisa in the room. Mike Kaisa is our next speaker, but it seems like he's not in the room. Mike Kaisa is the founder of a community network called Ateker, and their work is mostly in producing animations to represent or to storytell the communities, challenges, communities, strengths and opportunities. Mike, if you can hear me, just unmute. If not, we can then go into question and answer. We have 9 minutes, and we'll try to use this time to ask questions and to hear from the participants what some of their comments as well as clarifications that they may need. Mike, whenever you join, just cue me in and I can let you present. So before we get into the questions that have been produced, I would like to open with the first question. And it's this is to all the speakers. Anyone who anyone who would want to take up this question, feel free to add value onto it. The question is, how can we combat the spread of misinformation, disinformation, and hate speech through local content creation or local content platforms that we are creating? So when we're engaging communities, when we're engaging grassroots communities in collecting or in creating some of this local content, how can we ensure that we are combating with some of the harmful trends that are coming with local content creation? Any speaker that would want to add value to that question, feel free to do so. As we think through that question, I'll give the mic to Deborah to read for us some of the questions on the chat and the conversations. Yeah.
Hi, Whisper. Hi, everyone. We have a few interesting questions here on the chat. One of them is direct to Rebecca. And the question is if there are any opportunities for data practitioners to contribute other than providing the speech used for training these local language data sets. We have another question here to Rebecca, and perhaps you can address both at once. How is Common Voice addressing the fact that new forms of language are emerging that are not purely English or Kiwashi? Sorry if I'm pronouncing this wrong. So what are the major challenges associated with addressing this? We also have some questions and comments here in terms of local content about the other presentations, but I will stop here, and as we have time, we can go back to the chat, and I would like to please encourage the speakers to also answer them on the chat just because of the matter of time. So we can use both voice and chat to the dialogue here.
Thank you, Deborah. I want to now open it up to the speakers. Please use 1 minute to respond to the question, and then we'll now open it up for anyone who has any other question, if time allows. We can start with Rebecca.
Sure, thank you, Rispa. Thank you, Deborah. So to the first question, yes, data scientists and machine learning experts are welcome to collaborate with Common Voice. One way that we work with them is one, they can now use the data set that we release for the languages they're building. Another way that we work with them is through hackathons that we organize, where they can be able to jointly build models out of the data set and create something that is relevant to the context of their communities. But we also do some workshops sometimes for people to learn how they can be able to use the data set. So this is mostly for data scientists and machine learning. And then on the second questions, language has different variants. So for example, for Kiswahili, we've been trying to get as much of the variants represented. One way we're doing that is to allow people who contribute on the platform to self-identify which variant they're speaking. So you can say, I speak Kiswahili from Tanzania Bara, or I speak Sheng. So for Sheng, the big challenge that we have is in developing the text corpus. We're trying to work through that as well. Once we have the text corpus for Sheng, I think that's the Swahili we're speaking about, then people can be able to specifically contribute to that variant of Kiswahili. But the major challenge with this variance is the Sheng aspect, and the fact that our platform has yet to be able to accommodate different variants, because we have had text going up indifferently, and people will say this is not Swahili, but it's maybe a different variant of Kiswahili. So that's something we're working out, and probably towards this year we'll be able to have an ability for people to contribute to a specific variant, including that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. I can see the question on misinformation, disinformation has been responded to in the chat with the guidelines that Barak spoke on what KIPTANET is doing around content creation, especially for the different trends in digital inclusion. I don't know if there's any question in the room. Anyone would like to ask a question? Just feel free to raise your hand or unmute. Okay, I take silence to mean that we are all on the same page. And that is great, because now we have 2 minutes to hear lastly from the panelists. So every speaker, just let us know what are your one key takeaway and recommendation in terms of creating any organizations that are looking to create local content with their communities. So one of your key takeaway from the session and one recommendation, half a minute each. We can start with Barak. Barak, can you hear us?
Hi, Rispa. Yes, my background is a bit noisy. Just repeat the question.
Key closing remarks, key takeaway, and any recommendations.
I think, yeah, in terms of closing remarks, I would just say that we need more African content. Let me put it that way, because the meaningful of internet is drawn from its value chain. And largely, most people come to the internet to look for one form of content or the other. So I believe that there's still a lot of African content that needs to be brought online. And we need to equip ourselves with the right skills and the right knowledge. I don't think we have an excuse in producing shoddy content, because we do have guidelines that can enable us to produce content of international scale. As a matter of fact, when I look at most of the content that I watch, say on Netflix, is basically African content. Our producers have actually upped the standards, and I think it is the same call that we should make to the community, so that we can increase the content to the more than 2% that we do have, to a lion's share, probably 50%, because I believe this is Africa's decade. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barak. Next, you can hear from Thomas.
Okay, thank you, Rispa, again, and all the participants. I take is the appreciation of how the community networks are utilizing technology and applying the content to achieve the objectives to empower themselves. My recommendation is to continue with this process and continue producing content that addresses not just those challenges, but also, for instance, the issue of the misinformation. There can be content again that addresses such challenges, and in all production of the content, to bear in mind that content, the factors that we've discussed that lead to total inclusivity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Judith?
Great. So for me, the key takeaway was just the need for more inclusivity and cater to inclusion, and especially the persons differently abled persons. So that was a key takeout for me. And how can we, actualize it even as an organization, because we're in the journey of doing that. We keep on updating and improving. So that's also something to look into. However, for the content creators, I'm just thinking about copyrights and intellectual property issues. Just the need for more protection and how to handle that challenge, because you find that there's a lot of unauthorized use of content, and that means there's maybe losses occurring, or someone's content is being used without their consent, and you find that there's a loss there. So that is something that I would like to be looked into. I would recommend to be looked into by the content creators. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith, for that. Next, we can hear from Rebecca.
Thank you, Rispa. For me, I think it's very critical to push for representation of languages. Let's try as much as possible to have African languages represented on the internet, represented on different platforms. But I also like to echo what Barak has said. We are we as Africans, we consume a lot of Western content. I think it's time we also try to normalize consuming local content that is produced within the continent, so as we can be able to promote the producers and people that are trying to create content within the continent. Thank you.
Excellent. Lastly, Okoro.
I have, I think, I recommend, or two. I'll say my first recommendation.
I'm not sure. I think we've lost Okoro. Is it just me, or we've lost Okoro?
Yeah, I think we lost him.
Okay. I think because of time, would wrap this up. So thank you, panelists, thank you, participants, for coming forth. I mean, we've had great audience, and also great panelists for your engaging discussions, and participants for your questions that started out very early in this discussion. We definitely have food for thought, and also great recommendations on what it takes to promote local content that really is that really speaks to the communities, the different communities that we represent in this call. I'd like to close by saying that in digital inclusion, there's also digital exclusion, and it's very important to look into whose voices are heard and whose voices are left out. And with that, also to drive local content, we need facilitators, we need enablers, as it will not just happen as a bottom-up approach. We need a gentle push that is going to drive the content, vehicles of dissemination, as well as supports from bodies, from the different stakeholder bodies that are that constitute a community. So thank you so much for joining this call. This is the second of 4 webinar series. The next week we'll hear now real-time content that have been produced by community networks and community-owned organizations. So we will have like a lightning talk where our organization will just be presenting on their content. And then the last session for this series will be on unlocking impact, igniting sustainable change through supporting capacity building and local content creation. So we'll hear from different funders, different donors, different supporters who are pushing or who are supporting content creation in the continent. So very, very excited to have all of you join into the next webinar. And sorry for going past the time, and we look forward to having you in the other session. Thank you so much. Thank you, our panelists, and thank you, participants, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.